Hello and welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey. On this episode, we speak with National Renewable Energy Laboratory research advisor Jill Engel-Cox and senior building energy research engineer Shanti Pless about the lab's work at helping the world get to net zero through both new technologies and increased collaboration. But first, here's a look at the latest headlines on the Daily Commercial News and the Journal of Commerce. Safety is the primary concern on any work site, but the Gordie Howe International Bridge project is getting a little help from some four-legged friends. Several dogs are patrolling the site to deter birds and wildlife from nesting and protecting those animals from active construction. We have a profile on Demon, a 2-year-old Labrador retriever who spends their workday with a safety vest on and runs the grounds keeping birds safe by keeping them away. We also have a story from DCN staff writer Don Wall about the heavy civil sector grappling with diverse procurement visions. At the recent Building Transformations Conference in Toronto, panelists agreed that while drones, robotics, and additive construction is leading to greater worksite efficiency, there is less certainty in how procurement entities such as Infrastructure Ontario and its Quebec counterpart, the Société Québécoise d'Infrastructure, will mandate use of technology such as BIM and digital twins as part of bids and project documents. And as the Greenbelt saga continues, no Ontario Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing Minister, Paul Calandra, says the government will not only be conducting a complete review of the Greenbelt, but will also implement other policies and measures aimed at getting shovels in the ground. Calandra assumed the position after Steve Clark resigned on September 4th, following 2 reports from the Auditor General and the Integrity Commissioner that found the Housing Minister's Chief of Staff favored certain developers over others when selecting which lands would be removed from the Greenbelt. From the West, we have a story about how Simon Fraser University's new museum in Burnaby, BC, is a mass timber tribute to its surroundings. The museum, to be built along University High Street and adjacent to Blisson and Strand Halls, will be a modern, fully electric, single-story structure with mass timber walls and ceiling that will offer a connection to nature. It will replace the current 1,100 square foot SFU gallery on the campus. We also have a story about residents of a Northwest Edmonton condominium building having to evacuate after the city deemed it unsafe. A structural inspection concluded the building is unsafe for occupancy, a city statement said. Quote, "It is the responsibility of the building owner and their contracted building manager to ensure this direction is followed until such time as a full binding review and structural engineering assessment can be done and sufficient temporary and/or permanent remedial action has been taken that makes the unit safe for habitation again," a statement from the city of Edmonton said. That's it for the headlines. And here's my interview with Jill Engel-Cox and Shanti Pless. Enjoy. With me I have...
This is Jill Engel-Cox. I'm a senior research advisor at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado.
And I am Shanti Pless. I am a building energy efficiency researcher also at NREL, the acronym we use for the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, also in Colorado.
And I'd like to start with what is kind of like, obviously you don't have a million years to tell me this, but what is the history of the NREL? How did it get started and what does it do?
Yeah, so NREL was formed actually in 1977 in response to the oil crisis. The U.S. government felt like they needed to have a research lab that focused on renewable energy and energy efficiency. It is one of 17 U.S. Department of Energy national laboratories, and we're the only ones that's focused only on renewable energy and energy efficiency. NREL is an applied lab, so our goal is to bring early research to the marketplace. And while we started pretty small, we're over 3,000 people now working at NREL.
And I would assume you have, we'll get in the international part in a bit, but you have a domestic impact as well. Do you come up with research and then share that with private industry, or how does that all work?
Yes, we are certainly focused a little bit on the United States, but really a global, always a global view. That very first year, I've reviewed the annual report from 1977. We were already doing international work with partners. And the emphasis is on renewable energy, transportation and fuels, building industry, and energy systems integration. And this is a global challenge and a global issue. So helping bring those resources within the United States, with Canada, with the rest of North America, as well as globally.
Yeah, what is your interaction with Canada? Are we on an equal footing with everybody else, or because we're Canada, is there a lot more interaction because we're neighbors, or how does that work?
Definitely lots of collaborative research between the U.S. and Canada. Obviously, there's already close energy links between the two countries, pipelines, grid links, power links. And so there's a lot of collaborative research projects. There was one called the North American Renewable Integration Study called NARIS that planned out the grid or helped plan the intersections between the two grids between Canada and the US. Also, there's some programs now looking at EV charging and other things in those areas.
And Jill, I maybe jump in as well.
Yes, please.
NREL has an organization in Fairbanks, Alaska, the Cold Climate Housing and Research Center. And so that's actually now a part of an offshoot of NREL. And so the folks up in Alaska have been focused on a lot of the housing and affordability issues that come along with near Arctic cold climates and housing, and so they've definitely partnered with the Canadian colleagues across the border there from Alaska in some of those similar issues as well.
And you have I don't know if it's a sub-department or a different adjunct to it, but it's called the Joint Institute for Strategic Energy Analysis. What does that do, and how does it help people get to net zero?
Yeah, so JICEA, as you mentioned, the Joint Institute for Strategic and Energy Analysis. I was the former director of that program. It's now being led by my colleague Liz Doris. JICEA was set up probably about 12 years ago now, and it was set up as a way to look at how renewable energy intersects with other sectors. So oil and gas, nuclear power, but also with the economic sector, the financial sector, the society itself. And it's really focused on doing sort of early stage analysis that then can lead research globally. So looking at some things like climate adaptation now as things they're looking at, clean energy workforce. How do we decarbonize our agricultural sector? How do we decarbonize our manufacturing sector? So these sorts of areas that then will lead into future research programs.
Mm-hmm. Now, you recently went to Cairo, and part of your job is going to other countries and sort of helping them get to net zero. I mean, I don't want you to go into specifics because you probably can't, because it's you work for a government agency. You probably should just be telling some guy on the internet this. But like in that case and in other cases where Cairo is known for a couple of different things, one of them is being very, very hot. So how does a place that's very hot or very cold for that matter, or like Alaska, how do they get to net zero as compared to say someplace temperate, like let's say, I don't know, Iowa or someplace?
Yeah, well, really, each country is going to have to come up with its own solution. So I've worked with multiple countries over my career. This Egypt visit being just one of the earliest, and NREL has as well. And really, the goal is for countries to look at what their energy demand is now, where they want to be in the future, especially countries that maybe don't have full energy access to all their citizens and residents. So how are they going to get that energy access? And then what are their resources? And that's energy resources, but also their human resources, their industrial resources. And then what is their culture? How do they want to reach how do they want to reach a solution that's going to fit with the way their society and their government works? And so Net Zero World is actually a U.S.-led Department of Energy program that's featuring multiple countries, multiple sponsors, that's helping create these roadmaps and working with countries to create roadmaps that work for them, that are technology, market, investment-based, and then actually helping support projects that can demonstrate how this can work and how this can go collaborate between these different countries. And I want to mention that buildings and energy efficiency are a really important part of this. I'm going to turn this over to Shanti so he can talk a little bit about how that's important.
So while I think we have varied climate zones across the world, hot, humid, cold, temperate, island nations, I think if you look across the 50 states, the United States, we're pretty much well represented of all those climate zones within the 50 states. And so a lot of the solutions we work on the various types of electrification technologies for housing, for example, heat pumps, cold climate heat pump that works in Alaska will work in Canada, will work in Norway, will work in, in a lot of the cold climates, right? And so we have been able to, I think, do a deep dive in those technologies and those approaches across the different climate zones, whether it's Houston, Texas, or Duluth, Minnesota, right? But recognize that the solutions we develop for those climate zones and those industries do scale worldwide, right? There's of course supply chain issues. There's of course local labor considerations in terms of who installs what and the know-how there that has to be addressed locally within those communities. But just like doing good community work in the United States, that good community work expertise also applies to places like Vietnam or, the big push now, Jill, is in Puerto Rico, right? And understanding how to get the island of Puerto Rico to 100% renewables. And so based on, some of the work we had done with, U.S. cities, thinking about how to get to 100% renewables in U.S. cities, that analysis, that type of technology suite, applied then to Puerto Rico. Also, a good example of how what we do here in the U.S. Can be translated to other locales.
Okay, and another thing I'm interested in is that for my glance at the website. There's a lot of technology that's worked on at NREL. And so you guys are kind of at the cutting edge now. And I'm sure some of that stuff you can't talk about. Some of it, though, what do you think are the bleeding edge things you can talk about that you think, if everything works out, will be sort of in common use a decade from now? You mentioned heat pumps are already kind of getting there, but what's the stuff that we haven't heard about yet that we think we'll all have heard about in 10 years or so?
Sure. I mean, maybe from the building sector, I'll jump in here, Jill. I think one thing that I'm pretty excited for, we've been working on, is the whole idea that the solar industry has gotten really cheap solar panels, right? Where we've got the lowest cost of energy in the middle of the day, at least, is new solar that we can install at scale. So the materials, the dollars per square foot for a solar panel is really cheap. And so how can we take that industry that has done great at reducing their costs for materials and apply it to things like building materials, siding, or windows, right? Where we have lots of surface area in buildings that's pretty expensive. If we can take advantage of some of the lower cost materials that are active solar systems, but also part of our building fabric, our exterior siding, windows, shingles, that we can integrate solar into building materials. I think as those two worlds come together, you get architects working with solar installers, figuring out how to design buildings where every part of the building skin that sees the sun can also be an active solar system. Starting to see some products come online and technologies there that enable that future. Pretty excited for that.
I think the other thing we're going to see that's interesting in buildings is that the integration of generation of power within the buildings, storage within the building, so better battery technology. We're starting to see this now, but as these battery technologies get better and better, and then that integration between the building itself and the grid. So we're already seeing this with like virtual power plants coming online, where people at their homes generate their own power, they store it in their big battery system, and then say the grid is needing power. So there's a big heat wave or something, you'll be able to feed that power back into the grid. So and they'll be in a coordinated way, like at a virtual power plant is what they call it. And then people will be compensated for that, being able to provide the power for that. So I think we're going to see more and more of these little home style grids with community grids interacting with the bigger grid. So this will become much more of a systematic approach with two-way power between buildings, grids, power plants, and these approaches, which hopefully will be much more resilient if there are excessive demands on the grid due to weather, or if there's natural disasters. Maybe you have parts of the grid go out because of power problems, or power lines going down. I think we're going to see much more integrated grid systems that will be much more resilient, and that's where buildings are going to be extremely important for that process.
Okay. You also held a Net Zero World Industry Forum. How'd that come about in the first place? I think this is pretty recent. And what results came out of it? Or is it more of sort of a networking and researching initiative?
Yeah, so that was the beginning of that Net Zero World project, which is a global consortium project to help countries plan out where they might reach net zero. So Argentina, Chile, Egypt, Indonesia, Nigeria are some of the countries that are involved, and Ukraine. And that industry forum was bringing together many of the representatives from those countries, as well as representatives from industry, the national labs, and they came together to begin to plan out how this program is going to work, as well as begin thinking about new ways of finance and investment and technologies going forward, so that countries can help each other reach this goal of reducing climate change gases from the energy system, as well as industry processes.
Okay, and finally, if people want to see what NREL does, and I'm pretty sure they will, where do they go to find that out? And are there specific websites for specific things, or is there more of sort of an information hub they can go to?
Yeah, well, obviously NREL.gov. That's the main website. There are lots of places to explore there with different programs. You can find the names of the people who you can contact if there's more information about technology. We have all the standard social media, so LinkedIn and other sources, what may post things about their events that people can attend if they want to focus on a specific conference, as well as get more information. And then a lot of things are put on video reports. Most of our reports are publicly available. So those are searchable. So if there's information about a specific industry or industry sector, you can search those reports, and then the authors are listed there. People can contact them for more information.
Okay, great. Jill, Shanti, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
And that's it for this episode of the Construction Record Podcast. But before we go, I'd like to call your attention to two economics pieces by Construct Connect chief economist Alex Carrick. One covers how, while the economy appears to be healthy, retail sales indicate a slowdown can still happen. Another article by Alex is about how there was a general deceleration of jobs in the U.S., according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Employment Situation Report, except in construction, where the employment situation has managed to escape negativity. You can listen to the Construction Record Podcast on Apple Music, Amazon Music, and Spotify, and on the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks for listening.